Welcome back. The U.S. Department of Justice filed a lawsuit yesterday against Rite Aid, one of the biggest pharmacies in the country, alleging the company had a hand in the opioid epidemic.
The lawsuit says Rite Aid violated the Controlled Substances Act by knowingly filling unlawful prescriptions, including for oxycodone and fentanyl. The Associate Attorney General says Rite Aid pharmacists filled those prescriptions despite obvious red flags, and she says they intentionally deleted internal notes about certain prescribers.
Here to break down the case is Matthew Schneider, former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. Matthew, thank you for being here tonight. So just how big is this issue? One of the questions I had is how is Rite Aid even responsible? How are the pharmacists even responsible here if they're handed a prescription?
It's a great question. Rite Aid is an enormous pharmacy company with all of these 2,200 units across the country distributing these prescriptions. And in each one of these locations, there's a pharmacist who's in charge of this. And the evidence that the Justice Department has brought forward was that these pharmacists knowingly gave out prescriptions, prescribed these illicit substances to people who really didn't need them, people who maybe were trying to get more drugs than was actually for them, and they were distributing it to other people. And then they had other people kind of cover this situation up so that they tried to evade detection by the Justice Department.
Now, there were some red flags, and we assume, I don't know if they're employees, but somebody did raise red flags, and this was up until 2019, so well after the opioid crisis was well known. Was it shut down from the top down, or what happened there?
Well, there was an entire layer of people involved in this, and some of these red flags were quite obvious. For example, if you need a prescription and you get 10 pills, and then after you've taken them, you come in early before the pills are actually done, then that's a red flag that maybe you don't need them at the time if you try to refill your prescription early, because it's an indicator that maybe you're giving them to somebody else. There's also indicators that people were putting information about the prescriptions into the Rite Aid computer system. And people working for the company were deleting that information and saying, don't say that. Don't call this a pill mill. Don't say these prescriptions are unnecessary. And that's also part of the allegations brought by the Justice Department.
And do you mean from the top or at the local level, like your local Rite Aid, somebody was deleting these notes?
What is in the complaint right now is an indicator that people in the Governmental Affairs Office of Rite Aid were directing this. But this is just the beginning of the investigation, right? This could go on and other people could be involved up to the top layers of the company.
So how big is this? I mean, we've seen other lawsuits with Walgreens, CVS settling a multi-state suit for $10 billion. How big is this for Rite Aid? I mean, they're among the biggest pharmacies in the country, but they're not the biggest.
Right, but they are one of the biggest. And what this really is it's another piece in the puzzle of the government's fight against the opioid crisis. You know, years ago, people would say that enough people die of drug overdoses in the country to fill Tiger Stadium. Well, now it's up to Michigan Stadium, and it hasn't taken that long that we're looking at over 100,000 deaths in the country because of this. And the Justice Department is pointing the finger at Rite Aid and saying, you're responsible for this.
You know, the settlement figures are just piling up. I think at last check we were over $50 billion now between all of these different companies, Johnson & Johnson, Purdue. Do you expect this to continue happening? Are we just going to see more entities involved in the pharmaceutical industry going down?
Absolutely, because what this case is showing is perhaps there wasn't enough control, there wasn't enough layer of detection. And if that keeps happening, we're going to see more of these cases, and the amount of money is going to go up. And unfortunately, the number of overdoses will also go up.
Drug makers have been obviously criticized for knowing what this can do to somebody, to a human being, and the addiction. But where does the pharmacy, when we get back to the root of this story that we're talking about, how much blame is there on the actual pharmacy and pharmacists?
So in this particular complaint, the Justice Department is directly blaming the pharmacists and the pharmacies. That's not to say that all pharmacists, of course, are bad actors. This is a very rare occasion, and most pharmacists are doing a great job. But in any organization, whether it's the law, the courts, the media, there might be one or two people who are causing pain for all the other people in the industry, and this might be one of those cases.
So do you expect this to be a slippery slope? If we are talking down to the pharmacist level, do you expect action or litigation against doctors themselves and health systems who were the ones writing those prescriptions.
Yes, and that's actually already happened in this case, where that's part of the connection, where doctors have been prosecuted for these types of events, and that's going to continue. Now, as this case progresses, it's just the beginning stages, but we know that more people will talk about exactly what happened. And as that case, as that occurs, we could be seeing more criminal charges for other people involved.
If doctors can make the claim that they weren't provided this information from essentially the drug company, and the pharmacist can say the same thing, I mean, how much of this is really on the other people versus the people making the drug?
Well, there's a real problem in this case because when people did these things, they also submitted for reimbursement before the Medicare and Medicaid programs. That's called a false claim. That's illegal. It violates federal law. And when you do that, a lot of people have to sign off on that claim. And so it's going to be very difficult to overcome some of those instances.
All right.
And who do you think wins?
I'm not going to predict, but I think the Justice Department has a very strong case.
All right, thank
Matthew
you.
Schneider, thank you so much for joining us, former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan.